The new topic of rivers, I'm going to talk to you about river discharge, hydrographs and river regimes. I'm going to show you a picture of Radley. This is the boathouse down here, and so at this point the river discharge, this refers to the volume of water that is passing at any point in the river. So it's the total amount of water flowing in the river. And where I've circled at the Radley Boathouse, the volume of the water will be greater at that point than if I went further up here to the upper course. The discharge of the river will change over time. So the discharge is the total volume of water flowing through a channel at any given point. And we measure that in cubic meters per second. So it's basically measuring a cube of water that is passing through any point in the river, but we call that cumex. So that's measured in cumex. As you can see here, this is what all that kind of data would look like on a graph. So we can see from this graph that we have two rivers on here, the Lambourne and the Och, and over an amount of days the actual discharge of the river for both changes slightly. The Lambourne one not changing as much as the Och, but what that shows you is that first of the two things, different rivers will have different discharges depending on a whole range of factors, but also the fact is we can display the changes in discharge in what we call a hydrograph. And that all you need to know is that a graph used to plot changes in discharge over time is called a hydrograph. When we look at these changes over a longer period of time, so this is a couple of days on here, but if we looked at over a year, the seasonal variations in that discharge is what we call a river regime. So as I said before, different rivers will have different variations over a period of time in their discharge, and that is what we call a river regime. Here's a GIF of India, and as we can see, what this is showing is the changes in rainfall over time. So in December and January and February and March, there's not much rainfall, but as we get into July and August and September, there's lots of heavy rainfall. This factor will rapidly change the discharge in the river, how much of that water is getting to the river, and this will therefore change how the graph looks, how that hydrograph looks. So if we look at the river regime for India in December and January and February, the discharge of the river will be quite low. But when we're getting up to that period where we're in June and July and August and September, where the rainfall is very, very heavy, we will get a peak in the discharge. This is different to living in a place like Radley, where we would get those peaks in discharge in the wetter months, which in the UK is in January and February and December. So we would get a peak then, and then in the summer months we would get less rain and we would get more evaporation, and therefore we would have a dip in the discharge. So as I mentioned before, different rivers, depending on the conditions in which they're in, will have different river regimes depending on a various of factors. I've given you two river regimes here, using the terminology that you've had about discharge, about river regimes, but also key terms like evaporation, precipitation. I'd like you to have a look at both of these river regimes. First of all, I want you to annotate where the highest and lowest peaks in the discharge. But then I want you, off of those annotations, I want you to give reasons why these river regimes vary. I'll have talked about some of the ideas in the video, but try and see if you can interpret them and annotate both of these with possible reasons why we have got different river regimes with different discharges. You should be able to have 3 or 4 good annotations for each of those river regimes. If you're feeling especially brave, see if you can put a country or a type of area that you think that these river regimes would be part of.